After every LSAT, I've gotten a lot of reports from students who just took the LSAT saying the same thing, that logical reasoning felt different. A student messaged me right after she got out of the LSAT saying, quote, "I understood every word of every argument. I just couldn't hold the whole thing together long enough to answer the question." And she's not the only one. My inbox filled up within an hour of the test ending, student after student describing the same experience. That logical reasoning was dense, that arguments stacked more relationships on top of each other than they were used to, that individual questions felt like mini logic games hiding inside regular paragraphs. And when that many people independently describe the same shift, that's data that something has changed inside logical reasoning. And it's been changing for over a year now. Most students are still studying for an LSAT that no longer exists. Now, here is what is actually happening. The question types are the same. You still got necessary assumption, flaw, inference, strength, and weaken. None of that has changed. But what has changed is how much structure you are expected to manage at once. If you go back 5 or 10 years, a typical logical reasoning stimulus gives you one central idea, one assumption, one gap that you could isolate in a couple of seconds. The difficulty came from the language or from tricky answer choices, not from the architecture of the argument itself. But now, you look at what showed up on the LSAT. Arguments with multiple conditional statements interacting with each other. Conclusions that require tracking 2 or 3 relationships simultaneously. You read each sentence, you understand each sentence, but you could still lose the thread because the argument as a whole exceeds what you can hold in your short-term working memory. That is a fundamentally different test, and there is a specific reason it happened. When LSAC was forced to remove logic games after the June 2024 LSAT due to a lawsuit, they didn't just remove logical games and move on. Logic games tested something specific. You got conditional chains, rules that interacted, and system-level reasoning. And those skills still had to be tested somewhere, and so LSAC tested those skills and incorporated them into logical reasoning. In other words, LSAC took formal logic out of its own section and embedded it inside arguments. Instead of diagramming a logic game with 4 different variables and 5 different rules, or 7 different variables and 8 different rules, you're now disentangling an argument with layered conditionals and overlapping constraints. But you may not realize you need a diagram. You may not realize you need to make a setup. There's just a paragraph, and you either track the structure or you don't. And so this is not just a phase, this is the new architecture of the exam in 2026. So what does this look like when you're sitting in the test and the clock is running? The first thing you got to look at is layered conditionals, several interacting conditional statements. A conditional that applies maybe only to a subgroup, not the entire argument. And the danger here isn't that you'll misread the language. The danger is that you'll latch on to one condition and treat it like it governs the entire argument. These questions are built to exceed what your intuition can handle. So you need a procedural approach, something you can follow regardless of the particulars. You ID whether the conditionals form a chain or a bottleneck, and you don't waste time taking the contrapositive of everything. You're just not going to have the time. The second thing you want to look for is the invisible gap. These are arguments where the flaw is technically there, but easy to miss. A conclusion that quietly widens the scope of the evidence, or maybe a claim about improvement with no baseline, or a generalization from a sample so small that they shouldn't be generalizing from it at all. Again, the trap here is not that you pick the wrong answer, it's that you pick one that sounds relevant but doesn't address the actual weakness. And so your defense for this is mechanical. For every single argument, you want to isolate 3 things. What's the evidence? What's the conclusion? And what has to be true for the gap between them to work? And if you can't name that gap precisely, every answer is going to feel equally plausible. The third thing I want you to be on the lookout for is when you have numbers that aren't really about math. Percentages and numbers showed up more than they have in the past, but the math isn't really important. The difficulty here is structural. If you've got a percentage change where the denominator isn't stable, or you have a raw total with no population context, or a rate that shifted because the group changed composition, not because anything actually improved. LSAC is counting on the fact that students treat numbers as neutral, as objective little facts that don't need to be interrogated. And that assumption right there is the trap. The question is always the same. You got to look at the structure. Is this a raw number or is this a rate of change? Is the group the same group over time? Does the conclusion go beyond the data? Now, here's where this gets practical. That student who messaged me has been studying for 4 months, used 2 major prep books and an online course, and felt ready going into the test. But she was ready for the old LSAT, the one where pattern recognition and strong reading ability was usually enough, and you could kind of feel or intuit your way to the answer. But the LSAT has changed. It's changed in a couple of particular ways, and the good news is that the new LSAT is still trainable. The first thing you want to be ready for is how to deal with formal logic. When you encounter conditional statements, you can't afford to take time and to stop and think about it. You got to be reflexive. It's got to be automatic. You see a conditional, you already know the contrapositive, you know how it connects, and you can train that by drilling. The second thing you want to look for is being precise with assumptions, that you understand the gap deeply. Before you look at the choices, you should be able to state in one sentence what's got to be true in order for the argument to work. If you can't do that, you're not really answering the question. The third thing you want to be ready for is treating numbers as arguments. Every percentage, every rate, every comparison is making a structural claim. And you've got to train yourself to analyze that claim the same way that you would analyze any other argument. And the good news is that this kind of question has been on the LSAT since 1991. They're just showing up more now. But the practice material that you would use to study already exists across decades of past exams. Now, the fourth thing you want to be aware of is time management. The new LSAT has more variation in difficulty per question. Some of them are going to be straightforward, but some are built to eat up 3 to 4 minutes if you let them. So knowing when to skip is skill. And your review process also has to change as well. If your takeaway from a missed question is, I should have read more carefully, you haven't really learned anything. A real takeaway sounds like this. You're saying to yourself, I treated a necessary condition as if it were a sufficient condition, or I ignored a scope shift between the evidence and the conclusion, or I assumed the percentage change reflected a change in raw totals, or I addressed the premise instead of identifying the gap. For every single question that you miss, you want to write down the conclusion, the evidence, the gap, the trap you fell into, and what you're going to do differently next time around. That's how you turn your mistakes into pattern recognition and you stop making the same mistakes under pressure. Now, the changes in the LSAT today are not a surprise if you've been paying attention. These shifts have been building ever since logic games disappeared over a year and a half ago, with more conditional logic woven into arguments, more quantitative reasoning, testing structure, more difficulty per question. So if you keep studying with outdated materials, you're gonna keep walking out of the test feeling the way that student felt today, like they understood every word, but still couldn't hold it all together. But if you can adapt to the LSAT as it actually is, not as it used to be, you're going to find this version of the LSAT's actually more predictable, more structured, and more controllable. So the LSAT's changed, but the only question left is whether your preparation changes with it. And if you'd like my help getting ready for the new LSAT, whenever you're taking it, whether it's in 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, or beyond, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me personally is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That is an open offer for everyone watching this now or later. And if you find these lives helpful, I do these every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So please share it to your social on TikTok, share it in your group chats, Facebook groups, subreddits, Discords, wherever you know other pre-laws studying for the LSAT. I do appreciate your support. I see a ton of questions coming into the chat here. I'll get to as many of them as I can. I see Calyssa's asking about reading comprehension, saying it feels impossible to solve the passages in 35 minutes. Yeah, I mean, the time constraint on the LSAT is real. The question is, how can you know where to speed up and where to slow down? For reading comprehension, I'm curious to know, Calyssa, what is your current reading comp approach like? Are you taking notes? Are you highlighting? Are you underlining? How much time are you spending on the passage text versus the questions themselves? If you could drop a couple of comments there about that, I'll be able to give you more tailored advice. As a general rule, I find the students who do the best on reading comprehension mark very little or not at all because it takes time to write things down. It takes time to read things. And what you end up writing down, the notes that you take, oftentimes end up not even being that useful. And the highlighting tools on LawHub, the underlining tools on LawHub, they are glitchy, they are unreliable, they are imprecise. You don't want to be fiddling with a messed up function on test day when the clock is ticking. I see Calissa saying, I'm highlighting, and as I read each sentence, I rephrase it in my own words. Okay, so a couple of things there. One is that highlighting may not be worth your time. It may be counterproductive. Like I said, it's kind of glitchy and unreliable to use the highlighting tool. You might try experimenting with not doing that at all. And then the other thing is to rephrase every single sentence in a passage might just take you way too much time. And so you're telling me that you're having trouble solving the passages in 35 minutes, but you're highlighting, which takes time, and you're rephrasing, which takes time. So if you just do less, if you just stop highlighting and you stop rephrasing everything, you might save yourself a lot of time. And how awesome would that be if the way that you got better at reading comp was just to stop doing stuff? Rather than doing more, actually do less, and you will speed up. And the key just becomes, what do you focus on? In reading comp, you want to focus on only one central thing. What is the author's opinion? What is the main idea? If they could leave you with only one central claim, what would that be? You articulate that as your key takeaway from the passage, and then you solve all the global general questions like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, best title for the passage, the tone of the passage, all of that. You knock those out first. The details, the supporting examples, you go back to the passage to find those when you need to, but you don't try to solve them in the moment up front. And Calissa, if you want to talk through this more, you could book the free tutoring lesson with me. We could talk about reading comp in more depth. Again, the link to book that free lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. It's below the video in my bio as well. Moshelle's asking, do you think the April LSAT is too late to take and then apply? Technically, there are some law schools that will take the result of the April LSAT. Some will not, some will. Deadlines vary. Each law school has its own policies and deadlines about that. I would contact them directly. Also, keep in mind that the deadline on the website may not be a firm deadline. If you contact them based on how the cycle is going, they may have some wiggle room on that. But I recommend typically, rather than applying at the tail end of the cycle with the April LSAT, applying at the beginning of the coming cycle, the next cycle in the fall, because when you apply at the beginning of the cycle, it's easier to get in, more seats available, and there's more scholarship money available. And so I would say you could take the April LSAT. You could also take the June LSAT as a backup, but then I'd apply in September for the next cycle instead. I see Chrome is asking, what high-paying jobs can you do with an English degree besides being a lawyer? I mean, I can speak about the legal profession, but I can't speak about English degrees in particular. A lot of people go to law school with humanities degrees because it's a relatively good option compared to alternatives. I mean, the journalism industry is not doing great right now, for example. The publishing industry is not doing great right now. And so if you're interested in law, it might be worth pursuing. I see Sosa's asking, what did you get on the LSAT when you took it? So I personally got a 175, top 1%. Took me an entire year though. At least half of that was a complete waste of time, though. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months because the LSAT is ultimately a test of pattern recognition. And so if you want some help getting your LSAT score up in less time than it took me, ideally in just a couple of months, I'm happy to help you out and you can book the free tutoring with me. I see Invincible's asking, how long should we study for the LSAT? I recommend a minimum of 2 to 3 months, ideally 5 to 6 months if you can, just to achieve your fullest potential. The LSAT is the most important part of the law school admissions process. It's the most valuable component. And so given that it weighs more heavily than your undergraduate GPA or your application essays or your resume, it's worth devoting 3 months to it. It weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined. And so it's well worth investing the time. I see Just Chillin' saying, I have my test in a month and I'm nervous. I mean, yeah, the April LSAT is just a month away. The question is, where are you currently scoring? What's your goal score? How much time are you willing to put in per day and per week to get your score up? What's the gap between your current score and your goal score? For students who join our program a month out, we typically put you in a more intensive boot camp style program where you get live coaching 7 days a week. Not for everybody, of course. We're taking our standard 4-month curriculum and we're compressing it and accelerating it into only 4 weeks for that more intensive boot camp style approach. If you're taking the LSAT in June or August or beyond, and you want to take it more slow and steady, we can then take a more relaxed pace, which I think is ideal so that you don't burn out, you can maintain quality of life, and you can focus on maintaining your GPA if you're still in school, or your work obligations or your family obligations. And we could talk through that more if you wanted to book the free tutoring with me. I see Yogi's asking how to sign up for the tutoring. The link's in my bio on TikTok. It's unpluggedprep.com/start. The link's below the video on YouTube and pinned in the chat on YouTube as well. I see Joey says, if law school costs you $300,000, you should choose another law school. 100% could not agree more. I don't think anybody should spend that much on law school. And the way that you avoid spending that much is by getting scholarship money. If you can get more scholarship money for law school, effectively getting a discount on your tuition, you could pay a lot less than that, maybe even go to law school for free. But when you consider that law school is not just the tuition, it's housing, it's food, it's books, there's miscellaneous fees. There's also the opportunity cost because you're not working during that time. And so you want to make sure that you're going in to a situation, you're signing up for something where you expect a pretty good return on your investment. And so when you're looking at law schools, you want to look at what are their bar passage rates? What are their employment outcomes? When they're offering you scholarships, are they conditional or are they unconditional, meaning they're guaranteed? Definitely want to be looking into the fine print on all of that. If you want to see the stats on law schools, you can look up the American Bar Association 509 reports, and you'll be able to see the details for different schools. I see Ella's asking, thoughts on getting waitlisted at a T14 when you're below both 25th percentiles? What are your chances? Okay, so if you're below on both the LSAT and the GPA, it's going to be an uphill battle, and it's relatively unlikely. Ideally, to get into a given law school, you want to be above the medians on both LSAT and GPA. And if you're below on one median, you want to be above on the other median. And so if you're below the 25th percentile for both LSAT and GPA, to be frank, it's fairly unlikely. Of course, there are exceptions. There always are. If you have a killer resume, killer application essays, you got a Fulbright scholarship or a Rhodes scholarship, something like that. In those rare cases, they could offset low numbers, but it's unlikely. And the best thing you can do to maximize your odds is retake the LSAT, get your LSAT score above the 75th percentile, and then as a result, you'll be in a better position to get in. Hike is asking, will this year be as competitive as the last year, as 2025 cycle? Yeah, I would certainly think so, because application numbers are up again. They were up 18% year over year last cycle. At this point in the current cycle, they're up about 12% year over year once again. And so because applicant numbers are up again, year over year once again, but law schools have a relatively limited number of seats and the seats don't increase in accordance with the number of applications, it becomes relatively more competitive. Law schools become more selective as a result, and the medians continue to rise. And so you just got to fight fire with fire and shoot for a higher LSAT score to compensate. Mateo is asking, are internships even worth it anymore? Well, for law school admissions, they weren't ever really worth it in the sense that you've got limited time. We've all only got 24 hours in a day. And internships are significantly less important than your LSAT or your GPA or your application essays. And so unless you've maxed out the other stuff, I wouldn't spend time on the internships. And I hate saying this because I think internships are valuable, especially if you're getting paid for them. But law schools care primarily about your LSAT score and your GPA. And so I would never want you to have a lower GPA or a lower LSAT score than you would otherwise to spend time on an internship. I would say cut the internship, get a higher LSAT score. However, if you already locked in a killer LSAT score, your GPA is amazing, and you're going to have plenty of time for your application essays, then yeah, sure, intern at a law firm, intern at a nonprofit. I think it's great to do, especially if you want to explore whether law is right for you, but I wouldn't do it at the expense of your numbers. Umberto's asking, I got a 170 on the LSAT. I'm Boston-based, 2 years of consulting post-undergrad. I'm a math major with a 375 GPA. What do you think? Okay, so 170 LSAT is a solid LSAT score. Consulting is a great work experience to have on your resume. 375 GPA is pretty good, especially with a math major, which is relatively more competitive, more brutally curved. I think that you're a fairly competitive applicant for a lot of schools. The question is, what law schools exactly are you targeting? Because to be frank, while your numbers are pretty strong overall, they are below the medians for all of the T14. The top 14 law schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Chicago, Columbia, NYU, and so on, they've all got LSAT medians of 170 to 174, GPA medians of about a 3.9. And so your 170 is below most of the medians. The 375 GPA is below the GPA median as well. And so you might want to retake the LSAT to get above the medians on the LSAT front. They will see your math major. They will understand that the GPA there is harder to achieve than a similar GPA in the humanities, but the numbers are still the numbers. And so I don't know when you're applying, if you want to share more, feel free, and I could advise you better, but I would say, depending on where you want to go, you might want to retake the April LSAT if you're signed up for that one already. If not, go for the June LSAT, aim for 175 plus and study and take it and apply in the fall. I see Mateo saying, I'm at a 3.9 GPA, 151 on a practice test, trying to figure out where to focus. I mean, focus on the LSAT. Your GPA is great. You got a 3.9 GPA. That's at or above the medians for every single law school in the country. I'd focus on the LSAT score and get that up significantly. If you get that up 20 points or more, you're going to be in a radically better position. In terms of where to focus with a 151 practice test result, there's still foundational work to do. I'd focus on the highest yield areas, the most common question types. Those are going to give you the most bang for your buck in terms of time invested in logical reasoning. The 3 most common question types are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. So I'd want to start there. I wouldn't sleep on reading comp either because it's an entire third of the test. Focus on those areas, then take another practice test to see where you stand. If you can ID some weak areas and you want to talk through those on a call with me, you can book a free tutoring lesson with me. And for those who are just joining, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I'm happy to help you out. I see Riley's asking, I got a 146 LSAT, 385 GPA in political science. I don't want to take the LSAT again. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a second. Your GPA is pretty good. 385 is above most medians, but a 146 LSAT is frankly subpar. It's below the average LSAT score overall, let alone below the medians of law schools in general. In my opinion, there is no law school worth going to that will accept you with a 146 LSAT score. You could technically get into a law school, but those are going to be the worst ranked law schools with the worst bar passage rates, the worst employment outcomes. And some of those schools are going to be at risk of closing. I suspect that 5 years from now, a lot of the schools that would take you with a 146 won't even exist. They will have shut their doors. And so for that reason, I would say you don't want to put good money after bad into tuition at a school that might be at risk of closing and leave you high and dry midway through or with a degree that no one respects. I would say, why don't you want to retake the LSAT? Well, let's start there. I mean, how long did you study for to get that 146? Did you take a course? Did you get private coaching? How many weeks did you put in? How many months did you put in? How many hours did you put in? Did your score improve at all after studying? Like, did you start at a 146 and just stay there, or did you improve 10, 15 points? If you can get your score up even 15 points to a 161, you're going to have much better outcomes. And your GPA is really good. You're clearly capable. You may just not have put in enough into the LSAT, whether it's enough time or enough money. But I wouldn't want to see you go to a school that will not serve you in your career goals. So the question becomes, what do you want to do with your legal degree? How much are you willing to spend for your legal degree? And could putting in another 3 months of LSAT prep support you better for the next 30 years in your legal career? Think about it. 3 months now, between now and the June LSAT, to get 15 more points could set you up for the next 30 years of your legal career. 3 months is nothing. If it can get you into a better law school, if it can get you more scholarship money, it's well worth the time. And I understand that you might not want to study for the LSAT more. You might just be sick of this and want to be done with it. But if you think the LSAT's hard, wait till you get to the bar exam. Your LSAT score is the easiest money you'll ever make. And so I don't want you to give up on it and settle for less than you're capable of. And so if you want to talk through it, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring. The link's in my bio. I'll put it in the chat again. I see Josh was asking, a full ride's the dream, but would you say $40,000 for books, fees, tuition, and interest is not bad? I mean, $40,000 a year, all in, over the course of 3 years, it's not terrible. Plenty of people pay more than that, but the question is not bad compared to what? Like I can't answer that in isolation. It's like saying, is $40,000 a bad price for a car? I mean, if it's Toyota Camry, you're probably overspending. If it's a Lamborghini, it's probably a good deal. So the question becomes $40,000 for what kind of law school? The degree that you're earning, the prestige of the school matters. The employment outcomes from the school matter. The bar passage rates matter. And so I can't answer that in isolation. The question is, for which school, what kind of discount are you getting on your tuition? And what kind of employment or jobs can you expect upon graduating with that degree? So if you're spending $40,000 a year to get a job in big law that's going to pay $225,000 a year, yeah, that's pretty good. But if you're spending $40,000 a year to get a job that's going to pay you $55,000 a year, probably not a great value. So the $40,000 for what specifically? If it's for a lower ranked school with worse outcomes, I'd hold out for the full ride. If it's for a T14, then maybe it's a pretty good deal. So the answer being, it depends. I see Kuvam says, I'm pre-med, decided to take a practice LSAC out of 175. So many pre-laws are going to be hating you right now, but that's awesome. Congrats. Interesting, right? I guess my first question is, was this practice LSAT strictly timed under realistic test day conditions with no extra breaks, no pausing the clock, no checking your phone, none of that? If so, then maybe you want to pursue law school. Maybe. I mean, do you want to do this? Were you just taking it for fun to show up your pre-law friends, or like, are you actually interested in this? If you are actually interested, then maybe you might want to pivot. Maybe you might want to go for a JD, MD dual degree. The question is, what are your career goals? Like, I wouldn't just go to law school because you did well on the LSAT. Do you actually want to do this? It's 3 years of your life, maybe a significant financial investment as well. If you want to do it, definitely worth exploring. You could have some great outcomes. I see Jose is asking, are online law schools worth it? Maybe. I think online has a lot to be said for it. It's more convenient. You don't have to commute at all. You don't have to relocate. You have access to any law school in the country that offers an online degree, and that list is ever growing. But I also think there's value to going in person if you can, in terms of the social aspect, the networking aspect. I think that law school is probably better done in person if possible, but that's not possible for everybody. And so if you're not able to do it in person and online's easier due to family obligations or work obligations or whatever, then yeah, maybe go for that. I see David's asking, I'm testing in the 167 to 172 range, and I feel like I've plateaued. Can I get to 175 by next cycle? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, next cycle is a long ways off. I mean, if you're thinking about like, could you improve 8 points or less even by August? Absolutely. I mean, you could take the LSAT in August, apply next cycle as soon as applications open. And you're really saying, could you improve 3 to 8 points? Definitely. I mean, the question is how. If you've plateaued, that means we got to look into why you're stuck. We've got to change the variables to change the equation, right? So the question becomes, how are you currently studying? What is the gap in your approach? What could you do differently next time around? So have you taken a course? Have you gotten coaching? Have you just been self-studying with outdated textbooks? Have you just been using the practice tests on LawHub? There may be some support that you have not yet gotten that you could get that would get you unstuck, because the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually some low-hanging fruit, meaning there's going to be a lot of quick wins. And so the answer in terms of how to get out of a plateau will vary from student to student. Some students are spending too much time drilling questions by type, not doing enough full exams. Others are doing too many full exams but have gaps in their foundation. It's different for everybody. There's no one-size-fits-all answer I can give to how to get out of a plateau. It's going to be personal to the individual. But if you want to talk through what your action plan might look like to get you those next 3 to 8 points, I'm happy to meet with you personally for free and we could talk through it. You could book the free tutoring with me. The link is in my bio, unpluggedprep.com/start. I see user 48125 is asking, do you think financial barriers to enrolling in many LSAT courses limits access to justice? That's a good question. I mean, I think that definitely there are some inequities in test preparation, and I try to do my part to mitigate that. You know, I have these daily lives, for example, that I do for free. I have the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast where I put out literally thousands of videos on everything LSAT and law school admissions. If you want to check those out, the link's in my bio. And I've covered every LSAT section, every LSAT question type, with both shorter intro level videos that are about 10 minutes long or less. And I've got more in-depth ones that run 30 to 60 minutes. And so you can check those out for some free support. And then on top of that, I'm offering the free LSAT tutoring for everybody, because I understand the value of coaching, and just being able to meet with someone personally and get some pointers on your approach versus just a general video can be pretty valuable. And so if you're not able to afford the prep courses or the coaching, you can definitely book the free call with me and we could talk through it more. I see Dominic's asking, I'm planning on taking the LSAT next spring. When should I start studying or taking a prep class? So you've got about a year till your LSAT. Cool. I'm glad that you're starting early. I wish that more folks did. In terms of when to start studying, I would start now, depending on what your goal is. I mean, if you're looking for a 170, 175 and you want to be in the top 1%, you've got to put in more time than most people do. And so I don't think it would be premature to start doing some very light studying right now. I don't want you to overly stress about it. You don't need to start this early, but if you're really gunning for a top score, having more time will definitely help. And if you're planning on getting some support, I would also start that relatively earlier, because that way you can build a strong foundation and make your future studying that much more effective and efficient. Because if you're doing it alone and getting the support later, you might end up building bad habits or burning through valuable limited practice material. There are only a limited set of practice tests and there's less material than there used to be because When they cut logic games, they were cutting roughly a quarter of the practice sections available out there. And so you don't want to burn through the limited practice tests, just kind of winging it. And so if you want to talk through what your plan could look like for a year of LSAT prep or more or less or thereabouts, you can book the free call with me and we could talk through it as well. So feel free to book Dominic. Seth is asking, is it worth negotiating if I received a full tuition scholarship? In my opinion, never take the first offer, right? So if they offered you full tuition as their first offer, why not ask for more? It's going to cost you one email that takes you 5-10 minutes to write, could earn you tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship money, or maybe at least a little bit more. In terms of what you ask for a living stipend. You ask for all additional fees to be covered because law schools are a little bit tricky with this sort of thing. The scholarship might be full tuition, but then there's books, then there's miscellaneous fees for God knows what, there's housing. So you will still have expenses besides the tuition. And so it doesn't hurt to ask to see what else they'll give you. You could get a living stipend, meaning you could literally get paid to go to law school. And they're not going to give you $50,000 in living stipend, but they might give you $5,000 or $10,000 per year, which adds up. So yeah, worth asking for sure. If you've already negotiated a lot, and this was the result of rounds and rounds of negotiation where they gave you full tuition, you might just say thank you and leave it at that, but never hurts to ask for a little bit more. Bepasita is saying, so if I get great LSAT scores, I pay less. Yeah, exactly. That really is a great summary right there. Should put that on my next live. If I get great LSAT scores, I pay less. That's exactly what it is. The LSAT score is your scholarship money. The higher your LSAT score is, the better a law school you will get into and the more scholarship money you will get. And of course, the thing is that your GPA is pretty fixed at this point in time. You're probably already late in undergrad or already graduated for most folks watching this at least, but your LSAT score is still the single biggest needle mover you have available in your arsenal. And so, yeah, I think everyone should take the LSAT more than once. Don't settle for your first score on record because if you do better, great. You have a higher score now. If you do worse, no big deal. Law schools only take the highest score into consideration anyway. I see Azam's asking, just got into Cal Western with a half off scholarship. Can I ask them for more? Yes, you can. I give you permission. Go ahead, ask for more. I'm not going to ask for a cut of whatever they give you. But yes, ask for more. Why not, right? I mean, the worst they can say is no. Especially if it's the first offer. I think it would be a missed opportunity to just say thank you and take what they offer you. This is a negotiation. They are a business. You are a consumer of a service, which is legal education. And there is a big market of alternatives out there available to you. There are approximately 200 American Bar Association accredited law schools, and you could potentially go to any one of them. So there is no reason to go to only one school because they gave you a good offer. Even if they gave you the best offer, because you can ask for more, the worst they can say is no. And you have tools like ChatGPT to help you draft a good email to negotiate. Just delete the M-dashes before you send it. But yeah, definitely workshop that a bit. I think it's worthwhile to ask for more, especially if you have good numbers. And I think one thing that not enough applicants do is they don't retake the LSAT for scholarship reconsideration. Meaning, after you have gotten into a law school, you still can take the LSAT again, get a higher score, come back to that school that accepted you with X dollars off and say, I retook it, my LSAT score is higher, I am now a more valuable commodity, and I will help you raise your standing in the rankings, so now can you give me more money than you were going to previously? So why not? Why not go for that? Just another month or two of studying could save you another couple $10,000 in scholarship money or more. I see Launch is saying, I got into a non-accredited law school with a full scholarship. I don't have plans on leaving the state or going into big law. Okay, yeah, I mean, listen, in certain circumstances, it could be okay to go to a non-ABA law school, especially if you're getting a full ride. But keep in mind that it does limit your options to some extent, like your JD may not be valid outside of the state. You may not be able to practice law in other states. And so if you are totally certain that you will never have reason to relocate out of that state or work in a different state, maybe it's okay to go for the non-ABA school. But keep in mind that life can take you many strange places. If you end up, your significant other is pulling you out of the state or family obligations pull you out of the state, you wouldn't want to be limited in your career options, is what I'm saying. But in some cases, it could be okay. And of course, if you're getting a full ride, then that makes it a more appealing option, certainly. Francesca is asking, is a 3.84 undergraduate GPA good enough for a top law school with a 170 LSAT? It could be. Depends on what you mean by top school. So for the top 14 law schools, their GPA medians are all roughly a 3.9. Their LSAT medians are 170 to 174. And so your numbers, while they are very good, are technically below the medians of the top 14 law schools. You could be okay for a top 30 law school, though. The question is just where exactly you want to go, because every law school has different requirements. So look up the medians in the American Bar Association 509 reports, and you'll get a good indication of what kind of numbers you're going to need to be competitive. Anthony's asking, should I study between taking the LSAT and getting my results back? So you've got about 2 to 3 weeks between taking the LSAT, getting your score back. And so during those couple of weeks, yeah, you might want to keep studying, depending on how likely you feel it is that you're going to end up needing to retake. The LSAT's offered every month or two. And so for that reason, that gap of 2 to 3 weeks is a pretty significant percentage of the time that you have between your current LSAT and the next LSAT. And so it might be a missed opportunity to not study during that time. It might be prudent to keep studying just in case you end up needing to retake. And same deal for the bar exam too, yeah. Rems is asking, are there any online law schools that are ABA accredited? Yeah, there are a ton actually, and there are more all the time. You have St. Mary's in Texas, totally online, ABA accredited, Syracuse Law, Mitchell Hamlin. If you go on the American Bar Association website, there's like 20 to 25 different law schools that are either totally online or hybrid, and they are ABA accredited, and so they're totally valid to go to. They are quite competitive, of course. A lot of folks want to do them, but if you can't relocate, if you need to keep working, if you have family obligations that keep you needing to stay local, it's a good option. I see Michaeli's asking, does the law school ranking really matter if you don't want to go into big law? Well, it's certainly most important if you do want to go into big law, but it could also matter, prestige also matters if you want to get a clerkship on the Supreme Court, for example, or a federal clerkship. In other cases, though, like if you want to work in public interest, if you want to open your own practice, if you want to work for a family law firm or stay local, then in a smaller town area, then maybe it doesn't matter that much. So in certain cases, you want to go for prestige of school. In other cases, you want to focus more on the scholarship offers that you might get from a school. So in other words, you either want to go to a relatively higher ranked law school with more prestige in exchange for less scholarship money, and you're getting the value of the brand name of the school, or you're going for a lower ranked law school, which may not be as prestigious, but you're getting more scholarship money. So depending on what kind of legal career you want to pursue, that will help determine which kind of law school offer you should choose. Just scanning through for more questions, folks. These are fascinating questions. Please keep them coming. This is a good conversation here. Francesca's asking, can I still go to a good law school if I graduated from undergrad 6 years ago with a 3.88 GPA? Yeah, definitely. The big missing piece of the equation, though, is what is your LSAT score? That's going to be the number one determining factor in what kind of law school you end up going to. Your GPA is great, and the fact that you graduated from undergrad 6 years ago is fine. Law schools actually love it when folks did not go to law school straight from undergrad because you have more work experience. You're not pursuing law school based on a whim. They have more reason to think this is what you truly want to do. not for lack of a better option, or just for randomly choosing continuing education after degree after degree. And so, yeah, I think if you can get a great LSAT score, you can go to a great law school. But the big question mark here is what is the LSAT score? I see M578 asking, if I don't like law school, does that mean I won't enjoy being a lawyer? No, I don't think so at all. I mean, law school and being a lawyer are two totally different things. Law school is academic. You are a student. There's the big social element there. There's tons of reading of cases and random different subjects that may not be areas of your interest. In contrast, being a lawyer could involve all different sorts of things. Could involve more people skills, generating business, working in a topic specifically that actually interests you versus all the different requirements that you deal with in law school. So I think they're very different things. If you had done a couple of different summer associateships in firms in practice areas that were where you supposedly thought you wanted to practice, that might be more of a red flag. But law school itself, I think, is fundamentally different in nature than what you would do as an attorney directly. And so I'd say take some time getting work experience at firms where you want to practice in those areas, and that'll give you a better sense of whether this is the right career path for you. And for anyone who's pre-law school, this is also worth exploring before you start law school to begin with as well, if you can. So while you're in college, if you can get a paralegal internship, for example, that might be pretty informative. Rems asks, does your master's degree matter when getting a law degree? So in terms of getting into law school, your master's degree GPA is not factored in when they're calculating your GPA. Law school admissions counts your undergraduate GPA specifically, the classes that went into earning you your bachelor's, plus your LSAT score. And those two numbers determine your chances, largely speaking. But your master's degree GPA, while they can technically see the transcript, they will not factor that into their calculations. So I hope that answers your question there. Guillaume asks, I'm applying for law school in September. When should I start looking for scholarships? Well, law school tuition scholarships are primarily determined by the law school. The law school will offer you merit aid to attract you to attend their school in particular based on the strength of your numbers, your LSAT score, and your GPA. And so there are technically other scholarships out there if you just Google for them from different organizations, but there aren't that many of them. The biggest way people get scholarships for law school is based on the strength of their numbers, and then law schools offering them merit aid to attract them to their school. In other words, if your numbers are above the medians of the schools to which you're applying, law schools will offer you scholarship money to entice you or attract you to choose their school in particular. So you don't need to go out Googling for scholarships, although you can. I think that time's better spent just getting a higher LSAT score, and then every school you apply to will be more likely to offer you scholarship aid. Lydia's asking, would doing a post-bac to boost your GPA help, or is the 3.4 GPA and a 154 LSAT score reasonable? So for law school admissions, only your undergraduate GPA counts from your bachelor's, and so any post-bac degrees will not get factored in to boosting your GPA, so that's not going to help. That's not the way to do it. At the same time, a 3.4 GPA and a 154 LSAT score, those are relatively low numbers. There are law schools that will accept you with those numbers, but you're not likely to get a ton of scholarship money or get into better law schools. And so I would recommend retaking the LSAT to get a higher number there to get more scholarship money and to get into better schools. So in other words, instead of trying to raise the GPA, because you can't really raise your GPA at this late stage. Technically, you could by redoing classes from your undergrad at your undergrad, but that's a costly and time-consuming pursuit. I think the simpler thing is just retake the LSAT. Retaking the LSAT just costs you another couple months of studying. and a couple $100, but that's way cheaper and faster than redoing undergrad. So yeah, I say just retake the LSAT. If you can get 10, 15 points higher, you'll be in a much better position. That's the number one thing you could do to boost your odds right now. Brunsonian says, I'm 23 and about to graduate. My GPA is a 3.85 and my LSAT score is a 165. Should I retake? I mean, if that was your first LSAT take, I would definitely retake, but I think everybody should retake. Literally, I think that everybody should retake the LSAT at least once. Reason being, there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. Law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest score on your record. And so if you do better, great, you've now got a higher score. If a 165 was your first take and you retake it and you get a 170, you're now applying with a 170 LSAT score, getting better outcomes. And if you do the same or you do worse, no big deal, your previous high score still counts. So my question would be, why not? It's the easiest way to improve your odds of admission. It's the easiest money that you'll ever make. And you can retake it and still apply beginning of the cycle in the fall. We're speaking now in March. If you're signed up for April, you can retake it in April. You can sign up for June otherwise. You've got August as another backup test date. And you can apply to law school the second applications open in the fall. And if you get 5 points higher, even 3 points higher would be worth it in terms of getting you better outcomes, getting you more scholarship money. So yeah, I would retake. Your numbers aren't bad, but they could be even better. And so why not get the best possible numbers? And it's a bit late for this cycle, yes, but for next cycle, it's not. I see Sanctions is asking, I took the LSAT 3 times and my highest score is a 153. What should I do? Okay, so the question is, how did you study for the LSAT those 3 times? Did you get any coaching, like personal one-on-one coaching? Did you take any proper prep courses, or were you just watching videos and drilling questions? The thing is that when you're studying on your own, without personal feedback, without guidance, you don't know what you don't know. When you're only using videos, you can't ask questions, you can't get feedback, you can't talk to anybody. And so you don't know if you're applying the lessons the right way. You don't know if there are gaps in your understanding of the fundamentals. And so when you're at a 153, there's still, of course, a lot of points on the table, a lot of gaps in your fundamentals. And so I would focus you on the biggest gaps in your understanding. I'd want to look at your practice tests, see what are the trends in terms of what you're getting wrong, why you're getting them wrong. I want to focus on the highest yield areas, like the most common LSAT question types that you also have pretty low accuracy on. So even though, for example, everybody hates parallel reasoning questions, there are not that many parallel reasoning questions. And so I'd focus on a relatively more common question type, even if your accuracy was slightly better on that other type. So for example, necessary assumption, inference, flaw, strength, and weaken. These are all relatively more common logical reasoning question types. I'd look at your accuracy there, look at your step-by-step approach to each one of those types. I also wouldn't neglect reading comprehension since it's a full third of the LSAT. I'd also want to look at your pacing and time management, where you should go faster and speed up, where should you slow down, how do you avoid getting stuck or bogged down on particular questions, helping you learn when to flag things, skip them, come back later. In logical reasoning, for example, there is a general order of difficulty, meaning the questions get tougher as the section goes on. And so as a general rule of thumb, I would recommend trying to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 to 15 minutes, ideally closer to 10, to then build up a time bank that you could then apply to the tougher questions later in the section that truly need it. And so I think the biggest way to speed up is to go faster on the easier ones. Don't second guess yourself. Don't double check. Trust your gut. Spend more time on the hardest ones. To answer Liza's question as well here. And then in reading comprehension, you want to know where to allocate time between the passage and the questions. I recommend typically spending maximum 3 minutes or so on reading the passage so that you have sufficient time to solve the questions associated with the passage. Because if you spend more than 3 minutes, you're already cutting into your very limited time on the questions. you have about 7 minutes per question. You have about 7 questions in each passage. And so with 3 minutes on the passage, you already have less than a minute per question. You really don't want to cut into that a whole lot more. And so we could talk through all this on the free tutoring lesson if you want to talk through that with me. I'm putting the link in the chat again. It's unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. And for those just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. The only way these lives grow is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for them, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. And so I do appreciate your support, sharing this to your socials, sharing this in group chats or Discords or subreddits or Facebook groups. I do appreciate the support. I see Apples is asking, what's your opinion on Brooklyn law versus New York law? I mean, in New York City, you have like a dozen different law schools. They all have different rankings, different employment outcomes, different bar passage rates. I would look at the ABA 509 reports and compare them on those metrics. And then see, where do you rank relative to them? In other words, what is your LSAT score? What is your GPA relative to their numbers? And what kind of scholarship money can you expect? And what kind of pipelines or on-campus recruiting do they have to the kinds of careers that you want to pursue? That goes for every single law school out there, by the way. See, Tyrone's asking, what is a good enough LSAT score? So it's good enough compared to what? I mean, if you look at the pure numbers, I mean, getting a 170 puts you in the top 4%. Getting a 175 puts you in the top 1%. So those are good LSAT scores, broadly speaking. But I think an LSAT score is a means to an end, right? So it's really, what LSAT score will you need to achieve your goals? I would say a solid LSAT score is an LSAT score that is above the 75th percentile for the law school that you're targeting. And so think about, what is your dream law school? What is your number one law school choice that you'd want to attend? And then look up in the ABA 509 reports, the American Bar Association stats, what is the LSAT 75th percentile for the school that you're targeting? And then that's the score that you want to hit. And if you're just setting goals here, I mean, why not shoot for a 180 regardless? There's no reason to shoot for anything less. A better LSAT score will get you better options, so just aim to understand everything. And so think about where you're currently scoring now. If you've taken a practice test, what is your current LSAT diagnostic taken under strictly timed realistic test day conditions? What is your goal score, which should be a 180, or at least hitting that 75th percentile? And then how much time are you allowing to get to that goal? And if you want to book the free tutoring lesson with me, we could talk through it together. Basically, what I do is I help you map out an action plan to get you from your current LSAT score to your goal score over that time frame. I divide LSAT prep into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each LSAT section and each LSAT question type. We work on pacing, doing individual timed sections, and then endurance, working on full-length timed practice tests. Ideally, we want you taking at least 10 to 15 full-length exams before the big day, so that test day itself will feel like just another run-through. But the particulars, in terms of how you allocate your time, how many weeks you devote to each phase, depends on when you're taking your LSAT. I see Jane's asking about how many LSAT lessons I'd recommend. Same deal. Depends on what is your time frame and what are your goals. Someone who's studying for the LSAT in just 1 month is going to need a more intensive boot camp style approach with live coaching 7 days a week. Someone who's taken the LSAT in 5 months might take a more slow and steady approach. So we always like to personalize the program to meet your goals over your time frame. I can give general advice on these lives that applies to the greatest possible number of people. I try to keep my answers broad to help as many people as possible watching, but if we can meet personally one-on-one, we can talk through the specifics in a more tailored way to your particular situation. So feel free to book the free tutoring lesson with me. Happy to talk through the particulars with anybody watching this now or later. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. The links below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I know there are a ton of questions here in the chat. I apologize I can't get to every single one today, but if you book the free tutoring with me, I'm happy to talk it through with you personally, or we can meet again tomorrow. I'll be on the live tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.